The Redondo Beach Center for Spiritual Living and the Ministry of Dr. Moira Foxe presents Living Ideas.
And so this morning we're taking a look at this thing called getting along. Getting along. And it's not necessarily in the sense that you might think of just getting along with each other and so on, which is very, very important, but it's much bigger than that. It's much deeper than that. The whole concept behind today is getting along in alignment with the flow of life. With the flow of life. Because life is one great big huge river of human relations. And whether we like it or not, we are related to each other. Mankind is a very gregarious species indeed. And there is a need within us to get along with each other. And it doesn't matter how much we might find ourselves in conflict, or how much we might find ourselves combative, or how much fight arises in us sometimes. Nevertheless, that need is there to get along. And it's there because it comes out of a transcendental longing that comes from within the center core of our being that is totally unified, totally at one, totally in harmony with all that is. And as long as that is there, and it will always be there, always has been there, we are going to have a need within us arise to get along. And so what we do is forget mostly that there is that center core of at-one-ment within us, and that it is our very essence, that it is the truth of our being. It's who and what we really, really are. And it will never give us a moment's peace until we have aligned ourselves with it. I say lasting peace. May get peace here and there, here a bit of peace, there a bit of peace, over there a bit of peace, but we'll never have that lasting peace, or the peace that passes understanding, until we align ourselves with the core of our being. And then, by then, we will be getting along and in the flow of life. And so we look at those who have gone before us, and hopefully we learn from them. We look at those with us today who have a little bit more awakening than we have, and hopefully we learn from them. And Lao Tzu, way back when, said that to live life is to live it in proportion to the points of light that go out from us and connect with other points of light. To live life is to live it in proportion to the number of points that go from us and contact other points in life and in the world. That's very profound. I have been thinking about it for quite some time, and it's very, very transcendent. So, what he's saying in truth is that you and I are a point of light. And our purpose is to go out and find other points of light. Connect with those points of light to create greater illumination. To do that is to be in the flow of life as the flow of life. And that's what we're thinking about today and this week. To be in the flow of life as the flow of life, no less, no less. So that every wakening moment you and I have, whether it's day or night, that we wake up and realize, I am a point of light, and my only purpose is to connect with other points of light to create a greater illumination so that darkness is eliminated. That's your purpose. That's your reason for being. And let me tell you, all the pettiness and littleness fades in the light of that realization. So I am much more than I think I am. So much more than I think or feel I am at times. I am that truth that stands sovereign and intact always whether I'm aware of it or not. And I am always in the flow of life. I never can be out of it, although I can forget that I am in consciousness. My consciousness can be away from it, but not me, the essential self of myself. I'm always in that flow, and I can always wake up to it and align myself with it, and in so doing, mend, fix, heal, sort out, handle, and manage anything that presents itself in my life or shows up in my life, if I can do that. Now, all of the great ones understood this. And Lao Tzu says that you and I, through our resistance and through our prejudice and through our resentment and through our animosity, frustrate the flow of life. And he says when we do this, at the very best, all we can do is live half a life. Live half a life. Who wants to live half a life? I don't know anybody who wants to live half a life, although they may think that's what they're doing. But it's not, they say, what they want. And what is it that stops the blocks the flow? It's that resistance and prejudice and resentment and animosity of whatever kind that does that. You and I have known this for a long time. We hear it over and over again. We even say it to other people. And yet, we still entertain in our own lives resistance, prejudice, resentment, and animosity. The great ones knew how to be non-resistant, pliable, liquid, fluidic. They knew how to be in the flow as the flow. That's what singled them out. That's what singled them out. Non-resistance. Well, there was a lady in the subway in New York, and she wasn't in the flow, I can tell you that. And she wasn't practicing non-resistance. She got onto one of the carriages, and rare thing, she saw an empty seat. Rush hour. You know how impossible that is if you've been in New York or London or any of the big cities at rush time. And so she walked with great deliberation, moved quickly toward the seat, was just about to sit on it when she was flung aside by somebody else, another lady who sat in the place that she was heading for. Was she non-resistant? She opened her mouth and let out a stream of language that could not be repeated, including the word animal. And, let it be seen and felt and heard by all how resistant she was to what had just happened. And then later on, of course, when she calmed down a bit, she felt rather bad about the whole situation. She felt embarrassed that she had lost her composure. She felt kind of guilty about some of the things she had said. And she still felt a little resentful about what had happened to her. But she had a spiritual center, and she attended the spiritual center, and she went for spiritual counseling. But when she went in first for spiritual counseling, she was still feeling the fire of that fight within her. And she was saying, I ask you, how could anybody under those circumstances be peaceful and loving and kind? It's impossible. And this stuff happens to me all the time. What's wrong with people? What's wrong with the world? That was her stance. And we'll look at that in a moment. Now, we recognize ourselves in that woman. That's why we're laughing, because we know what that feels like. We know that situation. We've been in it. It may not have been an underground. It may not have been about a seat. It could have been something that happened in the office or in the home or with a friend or wherever. It could have been a number of situations that you and I can identify the same stimulus and response in. And yet, we say to ourselves, well, we disown ourselves from that, dissociate ourselves from that, and say, well, she could have. It's not about she, it's about me here. All of us, I could have responded differently. And so we could. Now, the questions that the lady had asked and the statement that she had made, we need to look at because we've done the same thing. What's wrong with people? This thing happens to me all the time. Well, why does it happen to me? I can tell you this much, that if that lady had not taken onto the train anger already established, that would have been a different situation. That anger was already within her when she got on the train. She was very disturbed because she was disturbable when she got on the train. And so it makes us vulnerable when that is the case. It weakens our non-resistance when that is the case. And this is an accumulative of all kinds of things that has caused us to be angry over time, disturbed over time, and so on. That is the weak link in our chain when something like this arises. And yet you and I will ask ourselves, would it have been better to go with the flow of that, to stand in the light rather than sit in the darkness? And yet we have made those decisions ourselves too, time and time again. Because we forget that we are points of light with the capacity and the ability to seek out other points of light, to create greater illumination so that we can bring light to the dark places and enlighten the dark patches and the shades and the shadows. That's our power. That's the truth of our being. And that is why we feel so annoyed with ourselves when we let ourselves down in that way. However, we can learn from such situations. Now, the great ones knew the law of non-resistance as an essential ingredient in the seminal experience of us all and for us all and through us all, love. But not love as we know it, not love as we play at it, not love as we make an endeavor to live it, but as unconditioned and unconditional life. That's what love is. Unconditioned and unconditional life that is whole always and comes from wholeness always and creates wholeness wherever it is always, because it's unconditioned and unconditional. No judgment. None of those things that cause us to live half a life get anywhere near what real love is all about. And so they knew that. And Jesus, the great master lover of all, the great master teacher, reduced all laws and all rules and all regulations and all commandments to one great law, the law of love. And he said, this is what the law of love is. Love God with your whole heart and with your whole soul and with your whole power and with your whole mind, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. And this is one thing. This is one thing. This triune concept is one thing. To love God is to love yourself, is to love your neighbor. To love yourself is to love God, is to love your neighbor. To love your neighbor is to love yourself, is to love God. There's no difference, none whatsoever. And you cannot do 1 out of 3 or 2 out of 3. It has to be 3 out of 3 to be love, to be love. Oh, who could live like that, for heaven's sakes? Only a Buddha or a Jesus or a St. Francis. Nobody else could. And yet all of those, and then some, said, You can do exactly what we have done. You can achieve exactly what we have achieved. Indeed, you can even do more, achieve more. If you can advance your conscious awareness beyond the state that we have, you can do more. And yet we don't take that seriously at all. Oh, Jesus, that was Jesus. Buddha, that was Buddha. I'm not a saint. There are no saints and sinners. There are only beings. There are only life beings. And you and I are a life being. And what we do with that either saints it or messes it up. But we're all coming into the world in the very same way, with the very same power, and the power is light. It's the force and infinite intelligence of light, no less, that would put any light instrument to shame. There's no greater light instrument on this plane than you are, even if it is a Harry Potter wand. You are so much more than that, and you have a greater wand within you. And it is your capacity and your power to be the light that you are. But you have to come to that in consciousness. And we only do that by practicing non-resistance. And to be non-resistant is to go with the flow until I realize I am the flow of life in expression. Now, order is an essential element of being. That's why we equate love with law, law and order. Love and law and love go together and are inseparable. And the reason is because order exists in the universe. So that means order exists in you, and it does at the center core of your being. And it doesn't matter how disorderly you are being, at the center core of your being, you are very indeed ordered. So, because you are the light, you are the energy of light energy, you can always bring cosmos to chaos. You can always bring cosmos to chaos. Cosmos is wholeness. You can bring wholeness to fragmentation, like that woman had the opportunity of doing on that subway in that moment, at that time. But no, we were at the level of name-calling and animal and so on. Well, just because you see somebody else being an animal doesn't mean you have to become one too, because two animals are not going to sort out the situation. Two wrongs never made a right, as your mother always told you. And yet we can go to that level, the level of the problem. Where do we go when problems arise to begin with? Usually our first response is to go to the level of the problem until we wake up and catch ourselves on and realize I've got to go to the level of the solution, which is a higher awareness of consciousness that produced that. I need to come higher, move higher. If we are to get to the position like a Jesus who could look at anything that came his way and said, this does not move me. It does not move me out of the flow of my life as the truth that I am and the being that I am is revealing to me. This does not move me. None of us like it when we lose our cool, because we like to be cool. Cool. We'd all like to be that sovereign being that can rise above everything that happens to us and through us and around us and about us. But that's not the way it is in a three-dimensional world all the time, in a very dense environment, which is what the three-dimensional world is. And yet it is within us to be able to be anything we want to be, to respond however we wish to respond. But it's not going to happen without practice. I have to have practice at it. I have to hone my skills at it. I have to really and truly stay awake, stay mindful, stay present. I have to know what I'm thinking and then decide, is this what I want to be thinking? I have to know what I'm about to say and then decide, is this what I really want to say? Instead of just doing the thing that we mostly do throughout the mindless days that we live. Launch our mouths, and there you have it. Then we're reduced to the state of animal calling. And it's not because of that particular incident. We take a look at that woman, and that happened to that woman because neither of those women knew each other. But the thing is, if we were aligned enough to be present enough and attentive enough and perceiving enough and listening enough to each other, we would get to know each other. And once we get to know each other, only love can exist between us. Only love can exist between us when we know each other. Now, Eric Butterworth says that when people such as that lady comes into our lives, if we were really getting who we are in truth and why we're here, we would look at that person and we would bow inwardly to that person, and we would namaste that person and the light within them and thank them, say thank you for providing me with the opportunity of remembering who I am. Thank you. When have you last done that? When somebody got on your last nerve? Can you remember? Well, we have an opportunity this week to make ourselves one of those experiences so that when that question is asked again, we will be able to remember and say, yes, I remember it well. And that's the level you and I are called to when we come to places like this. We are going to hear things that are very uncomfortable and may suggest to us, I don't want to go back there again. I don't want to be listening to that. I don't need that. You know, we're never going to grow for those who tell us what we want to hear. We're never going to grow in the presence of those who love and adore us. It's not going to happen. What causes growth in us are those things, persons, places, and things in life that do sit on our last nerve when there's only one wheel on our wagon. That's what gives us the opportunity to grow, to become what we are in truth, that sovereign energy, that non-resistant flow, that thing that realizes I am a point of light in this universe, and I can bring this light to whatever darkness is presenting itself to me now. And I can come through this the better for having had the experience. Be not afraid. I go before you always, says the light. Come, follow me, and I will give you rest. And I will recover you. These are the things we want going on in our minds. These are the things we want to be listening to in our hearts. This is the way we want to show up in the world if we are to fix ourselves. Now, going back to the question, what is wrong with the world? The question was, what is wrong, or should have been, what is wrong with my response to the world? What do I have to change in my response to the world to stop having these things find me, bump into me, happen to me? It's always about taking care of business here. It really is always about the self. Not me, the me-me's. Me, once, me. No, it's about the self. It's always about the self. Take care of the self first, and everything else will take care of itself. It's about getting into alignment with a relationship with yourself, getting into the flow of your own life, being in the flow of your own life, as the flow of your own life, and sorting out what needs to be sorted out here. Then automatically everything else will flow out there. And if I am in relationship to the self of myself, I am going to be in relationship with everything and everyone else, and I will get along. Of course, I will get along, because I'm getting along with myself. And it's always right here. Every situation that needs sorting out needs to be sorted out right here. And once I get it clear with myself, it'll be clear with everything and everyone out there too. And once I get to know myself, I can only love myself, And having done that, I will get to know you, and then I can only love you. Because there's no resistance there, there's no resentment there, there's no prejudice there, there's no animosity there anymore, because I've let that go in myself and around myself and about myself. And I've stopped judging myself, and therefore now I'm ready to stop judging you. I've stopped berating myself, so therefore I'm now ready to stop berating you. I have stopped treating myself so badly, now I won't treat you badly, because I know how to be. I have found the light within myself. I have found my true identification. And because I have found it in you too, because there's only one life, one light, one love. And we're all in it, as it, in radiant, different, beautiful aspects of that one life. Now, are you ready to see yourself as this point of light that you are? Are you willing to go out to connect with other points of light and experience greater illumination? I see hands going up as well as yeses. And I think that's wonderful. And I think that it's easy for us to do that here in the peace and quietude of the sanctuary. So the next time somebody wants to fender bender you as they try and cut you off on the freeway, let your response be immediately, if I let him, her in, they cannot cut me off. And of course, I will let them in. And so it is.